Yo and hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hobby Hotline Overtime. My name is Mike Moynihan. Over there is Uncle Rich Klein. We got Sam down below. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the show.
I feel honored to be with two hobby legends who run their own shows, something I would never even attempt to do. So kudos to both of you who actually do something I'm technologically not able to do so.
So, yeah. Sam, you're the legend here.
No, I am no legend. I'm just happy that I'm welcome and accepted and here and with you guys. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here. And, yeah, I think it's going to be a good show.
Sam, speaking of being accepted, you got the chance to be a featured speaker at the Mint Collective. And we haven't heard too much from what you have a very different perspective than a lot of people. You're young. And you're a female, which is not something that's super common in the hobby. So I'm, and not just on that level, but I was just curious, and I'm sure our watchers too, or what it was like being there.
Yeah. So as you were kind of mentioning there, I did have the opportunity to go to the Mint Collective, and yeah, my experience there, it was good. It was kind of what I expected, but at the same time, it wasn't. And the fact that I knew going into it that it was going to be more of a networking event and more so just going there to meet other people. I guess that didn't really hit me in reality until I was there, until I realized it was a lot of like businesses and companies that I recognized being there, less like card shop dealers. Specifically, like I like going for the value boxes and dollar boxes, and honestly, I probably saw about 5 dealers who even had those at all. If they did, it was like a very small box to begin with. So just a lot of companies that were there, I think, to showcase and network with, other companies or meet with potential relationships that they could have in the future. So that was kind of my impression of, I guess, what they were calling the marketplace of where there was the show floor essentially. But then the other kind of aspect to it was the different panels that they had and the different sessions that they had on those types of things, which I did get the chance. Obviously, I went to like the opening keynote with Peyton Manning and Josh Luber and Ezra from Collectible. So I thought that one was really good. And then I also went to a couple more throughout the weekend. But I kind of, can see in the future, more of these events just because of the different kind of programming aspects to it, where it's not just going for the cards, but you're going really as like a destination event to meet up with these people and network in that manner.
So you also were a featured speaker at events. So so tell us what it was like being on a stage. I know you also were on the national stage when you were with us at Hobby Hotline at the National. What was like being at the being one of the featured speakers?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I was very honored to be a speaker. I was on the panel around building a community. And so yeah, being a speaker I thought was great. There were a lot of, other great guests that were on the same panel I was on, and a good attendance as well within the audience that we had. And we just kind of talked around, different questions around challenges of building a community and things like that. So I thought it was just a good opportunity to kind of showcase women of the hobby and, the other communities that were there as well. And also just get, questions from the audience, which I thought was another big takeaway. One of the main questions that we got asked was something around, the hobby going digital essentially and trying to build a community around that. And I kind of thought that was a lot of the companies that were there in a sense. They were all like trying to make the hobby digital in some aspect, whether that be through NFTs or digital cards or things like that. Like Panini was there, and their free thing that you could get was a blockchain or an NFT card. That's what they were giving away at their thing. So just kind of that aspect I saw a little bit different from what I'd previously seen at other shows.
That's really cool. And one thing I really like when I watch it, I call myself the world's oldest fanboy of your show, is you get a lot. You're like, to me, you remind me of Arsenio Hall, and that Arsenio Hall always was so pleasant to the guests, and he got a ton of information out of the guests. You always get a ton of information. I learned your guests' life stories when you have them on. And that's part of building the community. And I was just wondering that, I know that you're not trying to build, but were there any questions asked of you on the panel that you thought were particularly interesting?
Yeah, I think there were some good questions in terms of, I always like to kind of be asked the question of, yeah, like, what are you kind of doing to improve, or like, yeah, what challenges have you overcome? Just because I think I kind of have that time to reflect on, okay, what has been difficult in this time, and then what do I need to improve on? So I felt like that was a really good question of, how, if for other people who are looking to build other communities in the hobby, what can you do to overcome that, and things like that. So I thought that was a good question. I kind of answered it with just the fact that I know, with kind of building Women of the Hobby, my biggest thing right now is being consistent, and that's definitely something that I have to improve on in terms of the consistency of doing interviews and in the shows, which can be hard because, as sure as most people know, the kind of content game is another hobby within itself, so that can take up a lot of time.
And we have a really good content person on the left of on my left on the screen, and Mike. So that'd be an interesting question for Mike. What's your biggest challenge in building hobby content for you and Ty when you're doing your podcasts or your webcasts?
Yeah, first thing I think content creators need to get over is they're not going to come up with something unique. Most likely, it's probably already been thought of. That doesn't mean you can't put your own spin on it and do it still, and be okay with that. I guess just be like, hey, I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to show a card that's probably been shown hundreds of times before on YouTube or wherever. So what? It doesn't matter, and being okay with that, because look, there are times, and Sam can probably attest to this, I go into writer's block's probably not the right word, but certainly content creator, just like, God, I can't think of what to talk about. Or it's not content. It's just, I don't do content just to do content. I think you need to do it when you have something meaningful to say and something meaningful to talk about, someone meaningful to talk to, if you're doing an interview type show. And so I don't force topics. I just kind of let it go. And that's been harder under the Bench Clear moniker than it was as under my baseball collector moniker, which I still do both. But baseball collectors do videos when I want to do videos. I don't feel like I have this pressure to put out a show at any certain time. Now I have 2 shows every week that I have to do on certain days. And that puts a little more pressure. Luckily, I've been doing it long enough where I can kind of, and our show on Monday is called On the Fly, and we literally do it on the fly. We're like, hey, whatever we want to talk about, let's just figure it out 5 minutes before, and we don't put a lot of prep into it. And that sometimes comes across in the show. And then, but the podcast just, oh yeah, I want to talk about this. And I have I try to make a list. Sam may do this, like a list of, and I know John does this for Sports Card Nation, a list of things. And then when you're kind of running on empty, you pick one out of the, off the list of, oh yeah, I wanted to do that at some point. I might as well do that now. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's, it's always something. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
I heard you right there. I was multitasking. My bad.
No, that's okay. Sam, how do you find people to do interviews with, and what makes you go, yeah, I want to talk to that person or this person or whatever?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a mix of a couple things. The first one is, sometimes I'll just kind of go off of people that I've met recently in person, which is a benefit of going to some of these in-person shows. If I'm able to get in touch and just kind of talk to them in person, and I may even ask in person, like, would you be willing to come on one day? Like, I'd love to have you on. So that's how sometimes I'll get people, and then other times, honestly, some people really get recommended. Like, I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say, hey, you should really, reach out to this person. They might really be interested in coming on. They do a lot for the hobby. So some people send in different nominations of people to be on. And then other times I kind of just go at it and try and find someone who I think would be interesting. And also, try and tell a diverse perspective, whether that be they're just a collector, maybe they are some sort of investor, or maybe they work for a company that's in the hobby, they break, different things like that. So having that different perspective of all the different things you can do within the hobby, I think is important too.
Let me tell you, if you ever run out of guests to have on your show, I volunteer.
Definitely, definitely.
Suze is on here in the chat. I would love Suze to come on because we have some questions that I think she would actually, Rich, the things we were talking about pre-show.
Yes, no, Suze would be able, even if she just puts the answers in the comments, it's a good one. She actually touched upon some of this on one of her card chats earlier. We were discussing just before you joined us pre-show, Sam, about when Topps are going to put the rookies like Suzuki and Torkelson and Witt and Julio Rodriguez into their products, and whether it's going to be Topps 2 or Update or other products before that. And I think my answer, which was kind of half serious and kind of very serious, was as soon as they can. You know, they're on the opening day roster, so there's no limitation for when they can go into the sets. This is not like last year was kind of funky. This year, they're on opening day rosters. They've played. You get them into the sets. And it's not really use them or lose them as rookies. So you've got several months to use it. I was thinking June or July we will see their first cards. But I pointed out, and Suze, who actually worked at Topps, could probably give us a little more detail. They still have to get the artwork for the photos. They're not just going to get it digital. Topps still buys photos.
Yeah, I was thinking about, and we talked about this yesterday on our show. You've got this looks like what's a really cool rookie class, and Suzuki's probably the biggest wild card in all of this. Bobby Witt's been in the system for a while, and Julio Rodriguez and Torkelson, these are not new to Major League Baseball types of people. And we got Series 2 is coming out June 8th is when the expected release date for Series 2 is. And if I'm Topps, do you go, okay, I'm wearing my Topps shirt today, not coincidentally, and I'm not Topps, but if I had the decision to make, I would put a couple of them in Series 2, and I would spread them out just to make each of those products have their own attraction to them. Or they could load up Series 2, which would be an amazing product if they did all that in that product, or Update. But you also got to remember, we got other guys. Does Adley Rushman come up later this year and have his first card? You got guys that are in the system now that will be making their debut. So just leave room for that. How do they make those decisions? I don't know. That's why I was hoping Suze would come on, but she said,
for example, the Pirates did not call up O'Neal Cruz, even though he did play at the end of last year, but he came so late. He's not on I don't believe he's on a 2021 Bowman's Best card.
Yeah.
So you have some of the other guys too that came up late in 2021. They may not still have rookie cards. You may be able to spread them out, as you said, for between Series 2 and Update.
And I wonder
if it's interesting. Suze in the comments said that's her next card chat column. Yeah. So she's on the same wavelength we are.
But I wonder if Topps recognizes that, man, maybe we made a mistake with Wander Franco in holding him out of Update and waiting to put him into Series 1 2022. I don't know if they feel like they made a mistake or not. I think they did. I think they should have put him in Update. I think it would have been a great addition. He played games last year, all these kinds of things. He should have been in Update. Not my call. He's in 2022 Series 1. Okay, great. Maybe they wanted to make 2022 Series 1, not knowing where all these other people who were going to make the rosters, etc. What else would Series 1 be known for, right? If not Wander Mania. So I don't know. It's just an interesting thought and topic, and we can all speculate. Topps is going to Topps. But to me, striking, I agree with you, Rich, that striking while the iron's hot, doing it as soon as you can, is good for Topps. There, this transition's about to happen with Fanatics or is happening currently. the more good they can do, the more successful products they can put out between now and then, between all the changes of the licenses and everything, would be valuable for them. I think very important and great for the hobby. Like, who doesn't want to see all these players have, their
one thing to remember when the rookie rules changed in 2006, and when Donruss Leaf Playoff was denied the license and it only was Tops and Upper Deck in 2006, they also created, at the time, it's since been changed as we've seen, to a more nebulous date, but at that time it was a firm deadline that if the rookie came up before September 1st, you could put them in that year's products.
Right.
If there was a September call-up, they had to go the next year. And I think that's actually not a terrible idea to have a set date to say, okay, these people, and the last couple of years have been funky because of what we had to do for the pandemic in 2020. And then, let's face it, the paper shortage or the printing shortage of 2021. Yes, today at work, I was IDing cards for ComC. We came to there was a product we have to put the checklist into the system. It came out about 2 weeks ago. 2020-2021 Upper Deck Premier Hockey. It is April 2022, and we're still getting a product with a 2020 year attached to it. So there's some funky stuff going on that's really been beyond the card company's control too. So there's some of that going on. So I suspect this will work out, and hopefully with Fanatics eventually being sold, they may be able to come up again with the firm deadlines of, hey, if they come up before August 1st, we'll put them in this year's. If they come up after August 1st, we'll put them in next year. And Fanatics bought Tops, MLB, MLBPA, they're all kind of partners. They may just say, fine, they may not. Suze says it's collaborative. Panini will probably go away in a couple of years, so it might be easier to have, again, a more structured system in a couple of years.
I like Logan's comment. I put a Wander Franco rookie in my bike spokes. It made a great sound. That sounds right. Isn't that where all the future superstars go? Oh, man. So back to the Mint Collective. Sam, you had a great time, and I know we talked about, we got the National coming up in a couple of months, which I never get tired of talking about the National, but do we think that this type of show that you described as more of a networking event, corporate feel, not really like a card show, although there were aspects of that for sure from what I saw, would you say that type of event is more likely to happen in the future and become a normal thing? I mean, we have the industry summit already, which I feel is kind of like what the Mint Collective was. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
Yeah. So I do feel, I had more, and I've never been to a quote unquote, like a true like trade show within actual companies, kind of a B2B marketing event almost is kind of what it appeared to be. But I know, I think Brad, the comeback card investor, I heard him saying he had been to the industry summit, and he was saying that the Mint Collective felt a lot like the industry summit. It's a very similar event, but I do think the Mint Collective maybe just had more of like I don't really even know what to call it. Just maybe more of like an energy around it in terms of like the liveliness of it being in Vegas and booking out different other events and venues throughout the different, programming things that they had. So that's kind of how I saw it. And I could see there being more in the future. I do think I heard rumblings moving forward of the Mint Collective being a twice a year thing going on in the future. So I could see it kind of just being, kind of like the twice a biannual, twice a year thing where you get together and network and talk about, I guess, the direction that the hobby is going. I think very similar to what the industry summit does in general in terms of getting the larger corporations together, having just kind of those inner networking events of where they want to go into the future. So I can see this event happening more in the future, but honestly, I think in the future it would become even more and more corporation businesses and companies like that. And I still think there would be a card show, but I'm not sure it would really be the main attraction or the main focus.
Well, one thing I heard about the show was there were a couple of things I heard, and then I want to ask you a question. One thing I heard was that you could have a card show dealer next to a person with, we'll call it a new concept,
Yeah,
which is a fascinating idea because you're not, in a sense, you're not competing then with the person next to you.
Yeah.
You're your own island.
Yeah, like I know, for example, there's a company, a newer grading company, Rare Edition. It had just like a one table booth in between two card dealers. Like it was right next to two card dealers, but it itself was a company within the hobby. So that was something that was very true. There were a lot of booths like that.
Yeah, and so my other question is, what was the most innovative idea you saw at the show?
Innovative idea. Honestly, I don't know. I'd heard of most of them before, to be honest. It was a lot of the whatnots, the loops, collectible. I'm not really sure if there was one that I hadn't really heard of that was there. The one that was new that I think maybe was pre-released before Logan Paul made his announcement was Liquid Marketplace had a really big booth, and I had never heard of it at the time, but essentially it's just a fractional shares of the cards, but in some manner it's linked to the blockchain and coins and things like that. So I'd never heard of that, although it's very similar, I think, to other fractionals. So I'm not too sure it was that innovative, but I do know like a couple of days later, Logan Paul went on to, make his announcement that he was a co-founder of that and then things like that. But that was like a bigger company that, seemed to have I think they had like 3 or 4 probably, booths that they had that was bigger that I just hadn't heard of.
Cool. So, and the other thing was, as you said, I've heard there was a lot of energy. Do you think any of these companies were doing their wares in the hope that a place like a Fanatics or a Collectors or would be, hey, we think your idea is really good, we're going to buy you out? Do you think there was any of that going on?
I don't know if there was any like immediate, like,
we haven't heard anything immediate, but I'm just saying, did you get that impression?
Yeah, I could definitely see like some of the bigger companies might be essentially going to these events to scout out some of these new and upcoming companies that they are like, oh, they could be competition. Let's go ahead and buy them while they're, young now and get all of their intellectual property essentially. So I could definitely see the bigger companies trying to go after some of these smaller companies with really good ideas and trying to see what they can do to incorporate them within their own.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, obviously, you mentioned a new grading company that you saw in between two dealers, and there's all these, I'll call them non-major grading companies that are out there, and one that we didn't talk about this pre-show, but one that came on strong, a couple years ago was HGA with Tyler running that, and now they're pretty much going, okay, Tyler sold out. All the circumstances haven't been revealed yet. Another, basically a venture capital company has come in and bought them out and is going to kind of shut them down for a little while, kind of refigure things and then reopen in a few months is kind of the play right now. Does that mean a lot of people are saying it's the end of HDA, which I would then look at as, how can you start a grading company knowing that it's such a top heavy market in terms of the big 3, maybe even big 4 with CSG? Not many grading companies can start like CSG did with a name already in hobbies in general and in grading. They had a huge market share they're the player on comic grading. They know what they're doing. There was a lot of already embedded respect for them, I guess, and credibility. And so that seemed like an easy transition for them. But someone literally coming off the street, starting it up, to me, it seems like such an uphill battle. And we're seeing that with a company like HGA, which Tyler had. It wasn't a money problem for starting it for Tyler, right? It was he had this vision and he wanted to do these things. And having talked to him before and interviewed him before, seemed like he kind of figured out what he wanted to do. Maybe it got too tough. Maybe it just like, golly, we're fighting. We made mistake. You know, nothing's perfect. Nothing ever goes smoothly. There's growing pains. There's all kinds of stuff. To me, seeing any new grading company, I'm going, why even bother? I don't know what my question is for us to talk about. It's just more of the HGA news, came out over the last week or so. And it's,
we talked about HGA last week, but as you're mentioning, I'll remind that they also filled a need for the market at that time. Remember, PSA, how far behind did PSA fall? How far behind did Beckett fall? CSG's not even in when HGA is created, and SGC is, catching up. They caught up first among the four major grading companies. So there's a need for people who want to get cards graded, and there was a waiting list, and they weren't grading more cards than they could handle. They had X amount of cards and X amount of time and X amount of people, and you couldn't, if let's say they're 10,000 a month, they're not taking 11,000 and saying we'll get them in. It was 10,000 a month. I'm not saying that was the number, but basically what I'm saying is they had specific structure, which meant that you were getting your cards back when you were supposed to. And I mean, I know that I gave Beckett through a friend of mine cards. It took me 16 months to get them back. There was somebody on Net 54 that's talking about 19 months at Beckett. And we know about the PSA issues. And, Mike, do you still have stuff waiting at PSA?
No, I've gotten it all back, but I didn't do anything at the flurry towards, right, when they announced, hey, we're going to shut down in a few weeks, get your cards in. I didn't jump onto that craziness because I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, no, I'll just wait. Well, I didn't know that waiting would be what it's turned into. And you can grade cards now, but it's not the same anymore. It's just not, to me. $50 a card versus, $12, $10, $8 a card sometimes, depending on the quarterly special. The game has changed on that. And while I agree with you, Rich, that there's plenty of cards out there that need to be graded, that people, I shouldn't even say need, nobody needs to grade a card, people want to get graded. There is, I don't think anybody can just come in and challenge the already secured and solidified reputations of the big four. It's I'm saying that's a tough road to climb, tough hill to climb. And so to me, it just feels like, oh, why would you do that to yourself? But I'm not saying there isn't a need. I totally agree there is. But I think that capacity needs to be absorbed by SGC, Beckett, PSA. Well, CSG is not even really grading cards anymore. They're just doing the whole eBay thing, right?
They're still grading cards.
But they're behind.
We get plenty of ComC. They're still grading cards. But they're also doing the eBay on top of that. Right,
which is a lot, right?
Right. I mean, well, and Ryan said in one of our chats that eventually that may be down to $250 of raw that they're. Remember, they're not really grading it; they're just verifying it.
Right.
That they're real. So that's a little bit different too. They're not having to. I mean, if the card is creased, they're not worried about whether it's a 3 or a 4. But if it's a real card, that's all they're doing is verifying it's a real card.
Good point. And that it was correctly described in the eBay listing.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll also point out on CSG, they made a very smart decision, and I still don't know why Beckett didn't have non-competes where they hired basically the senior vintage guy from Beckett, Andy Broom, who's really good on vintage, and then Weston Reeves. So they swooped up and took 2 people from Beckett grading. So not only did they have a name, but they made sure to take 2 very experienced graders with to come join them.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, I agree with Mike in terms of I'm not really sure as a new company, before you start a company, you probably have a business plan and you've worked out the numbers that this will be, a good idea. And so, yeah, I'm not really sure that the numbers align with such a strong presence of these companies that we've mentioned here. So, yeah, I'm not really sure. It's definitely an uphill battle. And then I think too with CSG, they were at the Mint Collective as well. And that was, I think, when they were unveiling their new label as well in person. So that was interesting to see as well.
And I saw Cooter's comment, and Cooter, let's make this a little more of a general thing than talking just about grading. I've actually worked for a startup company. It was almost 40 years ago, but I don't know if either of you have ever worked for a startup company.
No.
Okay, I did. It was a company called Sports Information Database. Basically, if you ever saw a baseball reference or basketball reference or hockey reference or football reference, that ended up being what the goal of Sports Information Database was in 1984. It was a company 20 years ahead of its time. And there was like a $5 million seed, and it went away in about 10 months. And basically, we got bought out, and then they reneged, and it's a long story. And a bunch of the people I work with there are still in the sports field in one way or another. Most of us are starting to get ready to retire, but some of us are still in the sports field who work there. But it was a startup company. And we had 35, 40 employees, so we knew what was going on. Our owners kept us informed. We knew the highs and we knew their lows. And on February 12th, 1985, the owner comes in, says, "Gentlemen, I have good news and bad news for you. What do you want to hear first?" And we all said, "We want to hear the bad news first, so get it out of the way. Gentlemen, we will not be able to make payroll on Friday." Okay, that's pretty much the end of this company. And it struggled. And then somebody tried to buy them out. And then they called us back to work. And when I was and they pulled out literally as I was on the plane to the 1985 National, the facts came, "We're not going to do this deal." So I got basically 2 weeks severance from all that, and it went bye-bye. But it was a great idea, but it went bye-bye. And that's, I think, part of the discussion we're having is that HGA was a startup. And it had a really good idea, and it was needed at the time. And I think John Keating said it really well. It was a darling because it was something needed. And now it's not needed. So now it's being retooled, maybe into something else. And for a lot of these other companies, they may be being retooled too, if they're startups. It doesn't mean they didn't have a good idea. It doesn't mean they weren't needed when they were created. But it's not easy with startups to make it work. Most startups fail within their first year.
And that's I think maybe that is the broader discussion with the hobby booming over the last couple of years. And you see all these companies, not just grading companies. You've got how many different fractional companies now that are doing that? How many different sports card, information, databases are there out there with price histories and you got Card Ladder and all of the variants of that. How many? I don't think the hobbies can sustain, all these different people trying to take their spin on a good idea. Having data is a great idea. Do we need 4 or 5 companies doing that? And really, what's their differentiator? What makes them special? Because they're not all going to survive, as Rich pointed out. I don't know. It's maybe a broader discussion about the hobby that we don't necessarily need to get into on this show, but it's not surprising that we're seeing some of these companies now go, yeah, we're not going to be around, or we're hoping we get bought out because we're kind of just dying on the vine anyway.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just thinking of, I think a lot of companies, almost kind of what Rich was saying, came along in the boom, kind of when there was a need, so maybe a false need, but a need at that point for some of this. But now as things are just staying more steady, some of these companies are beginning to realize this may not be as sustainable as they initially kind of thought it was, or whatever roller coaster that was in the beginning. But yeah, I think too of a company like Stock in terms of, how they came in and they seem to be doing somewhat well. And then obviously I just think they kind of spread themselves too thin in what they were doing, and, ended up having to pull everything, or, whatever situation they're in now, not where they were a couple months ago anyways.
Remember, Stock got a $10 million seeding funding. Kevin Durant was involved in it. We looked up the article.
Yeah.
That's, they and what I really liked about Stock is they had a defined universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, frankly, if they had stayed small in their defined universe, they'd probably still be here today. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
As you said correctly, Sam, they grew in ways they probably didn't need to grow.
Yeah, I think that was kind of what I was hearing on people's opinions in terms of if they had stayed trying to build the platform, like what they were actually doing with what they started with in terms of kind of like maybe getting into breaks or other things like that, like starting with their main concept that they had and continuing to work and improve on that. I think, yeah, there would definitely be an avenue for them in the future, but we will see.
This is a great comment, and I agree with it from the card hobbyist. When your customer market is based on speculation and the speculated market asset crashes, customers will disappear. I don't think we're seeing a card crash necessarily. We've seen some prices certainly, come back down a little bit, but I think there's still a lot of interest in the hobby. I think there's still a lot of excitement around the hobby. I think the National this year is going to prove that there's still a lot that's positive about the hobby. It's just so many people trying to scramble for the crumbs that are left over by PSA or whoever, or, collectible is the one fractional place, and then you've got all these others trying to also get it. There's just not enough to go around. There's just not that much demand for it, I think, for all these different things. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the hobby continues to develop, this business to business type things. I think you're going to see some consolidation, which is normal in any industry, as three guys go, yeah, we're all doing the same thing. Let's merge together and be one really good thing at this. Anyway, sorry, we got
really off on the interesting because I stopped in Kyle's store this weekend, Kyle Robertson's, and he has a show at the Arlington Convention Center, or whatever the corporate name is now. I think it's Esports Expo Center, but it's for those of us who live in the DFW area for a while. It's the Arlington Convention Center.
Yeah,
and I'm excited. It's the first time I'll do anything at a show there since the 1990 National, which is a different subject. But it'll be interesting to see how many people they draw to that show.
It will,
because Kyle's got an awesome mailing list, awesome text list, and there's an excitement to people coming to a show. It's not that far from the airport. There'll be some people flying in. It's not going to be nearly as big as the Dallas Card Show in Allen, which is 600 tables and takes the whole hotel. But it's a nice venue. And it's going to be fun to see. But I'm going to be curious because they drew 1,000, 1,200 people to the December show. I think they might draw 12 to 1,500 for the Arlington Convention Center because it's even more parking and it's a better known place.
Yeah, I can tell you, going to a card show a few weeks ago in Missoula, Montana, that there's a lot of excitement around the hobby. There must have been over 1,000 people that came through that show of 60 tables. I mean, it was packed, and dads and kids and family. It was fantastic. It was a great vibe and great atmosphere. And so, again, I don't think there's any problem with the hobby. I wonder how many slices can the hobby be sliced into, and everybody wants a piece of that. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic going forward. One last topic today that I want to discuss. Yesterday was an important day for a lot of people because it was tax day. We all owed Uncle Sam, most people that were getting refunds filed their taxes as soon as they could back in late January, February, early March. The rest of us that had to pay Uncle Sam, we all waited till yesterday to send our checks in. How do you guys think taxes, both refunds and having to pay, affects the hobby, either short term or whatever. Sam, did you have to pay taxes this year?
Yeah. So I actually had a really weird story of I filed a couple weeks ago. I did get a refund, or I thought I got a refund. And I noticed I filed through H&R Block, and I noticed like it never really went through. So I called them yesterday just to make sure things were going through. They're like, "Oh yeah, for some reason like it didn't submit." I was like I paid you guys, like I have a receipt of filing and everything. So that was a little frustrating to go through that experience, but yeah, so I did file. I do think moving forward, specifically with eBay, I know obviously I'm gonna get, whatever that form is that I need to file this year through eBay. So I think that's gonna have a bigger impact than people may realize, of just like people who casually got in and maybe sold cards here and there. Now the limit is $600, I believe, on eBay, and before they send you the form. So I think I've definitely, starting this year, had my records of everything I've been selling on eBay very much to a T, just because I don't want to have to worry about that come next tax season. But yeah, I think it'll have an impact maybe this time next year, when people are realizing like, oh shoot, like I don't have any of this information, like I'm gonna have to pay on all of this stuff, when in likely they didn't include, how much it cost them, or even if they took a profit on that specific, transaction. So I can see it playing a really big role probably in the next year or so, just with, all the different, I even think Venmo now, and, other, kind of payment tools are starting to implement these tax, regulations, which I think will just be really interesting to see it take place.
Well, it legally you were always supposed to
Yeah.
record over $600. That's nothing new. It's now they're fine, especially because of all the activity the last couple years that were pandemic based. It's like you better they probably let the companies know, hey, it really helps if you tell these people, what they took in. And if you're good at accounting, you're also keeping track of what you spent. And like if you drove to a card show or flew to a card show, or if you went to the Mint Collective, all that money you spent getting there, you went to a card show. Even if there was even if half the vendors weren't tables, it's still a card show. You can write that off as an expense. So some of that will come up. I had to pay taxes this year. I mean, it's no fun. I mean, the only good thing was I went to my accountant's on the 15th, and he's a family friend of my wife and mother-in-law, and they said, you can't come in. He said, no, I told Rich he could come. And so when we were there, to check, I sent the IRS was still the same amount of money, basically. But we discovered, we reran the numbers. Oh, I owe $250 less than they thought. Okay, that's a good day. But I still had to pay. I still sent the IRS a check, on Friday. It's like, I don't want to deal with this on Monday. I'll do this today. But when I managed the store or owned stores, April was always a terrible month back in the day. April and September were always the worst month for retail, because the people who paid taxes don't want to do it. And people who got refunds use that money for other purposes too. So it was, and then September was the back to school month. And now it's September and October, maybe even August. So those are trickier situations. And it's interesting because I'm going to be interested to see what the show's like this weekend, the weekend after a tax weekend.
Yeah. Also, there's another dynamic, like for me, and Sam, do you monetize your YouTube channel?
No, actually. So I'm in the clear there.
Okay. I got a 1099 from Google
Mm.
for my AdSense revenue from YouTube. And it wasn't huge, but it was something I had to put on my taxes, and I don't have a business set up for that. So it's just extra income and with no taxes taken out. So it's like, wow. And I don't really have a whole lot of expense. I wish I could tell you I should be able to write off all the cards I show because I use them as props on my show, but I don't think that really flies actually. But that's something that going forward, people have to think about in addition to selling cards on eBay. But what Rich was pointing out, which I think is true, and Sue's even said it, she's taking a break from buying cards because she had to pay taxes. I think as taxes continue to hit people, and even if you're in the hobby, making money on the hobby, you're going to go, whoa, I may have to take a break a little bit. I knew mine was coming. I had the money saved up for my taxes, so that wasn't like a personal shock, financial shock to me. But I have had a lot of clients call me as a financial planner over the last week with some financial shocks that as their accountants would get their taxes done going, I need 10 grand. I need 50 grand. I need whatever. I mean, big dollars, not that they're card people, but this is just general Americans, which card people are those people too. And you're like, whoa, I didn't know I was going to have to pay that much. And I do agree with Rich. I don't think people use their refunds for cards much, really. I think people have, that's a kind of a forced savings on most people, and they end up using that money to pay off credit cards, or, pay off more on their house, or do other things, right? Which is, by the way, it's a terrible forced savings. You shouldn't let the government borrow your money all year. That's not
yeah. I was going to say, yeah, that's what my dad has always told me. He's like, you should even it out to where you don't have to pay anything, or you only pay a small amount. And I'm like, well, obviously that didn't happen this year. It was very weird with just me working in 2 states. My taxes weren't exactly, I think, correct in the fact that I owed one state a lot, or one state owed me a lot. So it like kind of all evened out there. But yeah, I agree. I think with the small amount of refund that I got, I probably won't be using it to buy cards. I'll probably just be using it to pay rent, or, something like that.
Well, I'm laughing when Sam says 2 states, because I worked for about a year and a half for Chase Manhattan, which shows you how long ago I worked in New York City for Chase Manhattan. And I was living in New Jersey. It was an easy bus ride. It was a 2-minute walk from my house to the bus, and so 2 minutes getting off. So it's a nice, easy commute. And then there was walking distance from the Port Authority at Times Square. So it was actually not a bad commute. It would be about an hour. So that's not bad, commuting into New York and not having to drive. But I had to pay, and I would get refunds on this, I had to pay New York State and New York City income tax on my income, because I worked in the city and I worked in New York State, but I lived in New Jersey, but I had to pay it. I got that money back because they could not keep that money because I was not a resident, but you had to pay it first. Right. So I sympathize with you on that, Sam. Working in 2 states is never a fun thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, other people like John saying here, you also have not only tax day, but again, we're less than 100 days from the national. There are a lot of people that actively save money for that show, to go to that show. And that's an interesting dynamic too over the next few months. I don't know. Will that matter? That's maybe a question. Does all of this matter and cause some type of a little dip in the hobby over the next few months? That's my question, I guess.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think about that in terms of, the national. I have like a card or 2 that I'm waiting to get back from PSA in hopes of selling it, to have money to spend at the national. Me just kind of thinking about that real quick here is I could see, maybe prices right now, because people are trying to get off some of their inventory to save up for the national. I could see some things going down because of that, because there's just maybe more people are listing items just to save up, or things like that could be happening for the preparation of that.
Yeah, Suze might have a good point here. I gotta bring twice as much money. Yeah. I have to gamble some, and I guess buying cards is gambling too if you're buying.
Yeah, it could be
rookies, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see the whole dynamic of national and casinos. I know that Rich has been to the Atlantic City one the last time, right? Was that a big deal?
I was in 80. I was there in 88. I was there in 2003. I've been to at least 2 in Atlantic City, maybe 3. I'm not positive. And I was definitely to 2 in Atlantic City. I actually set up at the 88 National.
Well, I don't
think I actually did play the casinos in 88. I actually won in 88. like a couple $100. I just had a really good show and a really good time at the blackjack table. What can I tell you?
I remember 2018, the show was in Cleveland, and they have a casino there in downtown Cleveland. And we went one night, and I won enough money playing blackjack that I was able to buy a card the next day that I wasn't planning on buying because it was too expensive, but I won enough money to basically pay for it. Doesn't always work that way, because then I went to, no, that's not true. When I went to the industry summit last September, it was in Vegas, same place as the Mint Collective, and they had a card show, and I went to that, and I won enough money at blackjack there to buy a Roy Campanella Red Heart, or not Red Heart. It's the Wieners card. I just went blank. Rich, the
Dandy.
No, gosh darn it,
Wilson Wiener.
Yes, I was able to buy a Campanella of that, like a $900 card, all from blackjack winnings. So hopefully,
card. And by $900, the casino doesn't usually report unless you have more than $1,200, unless they've changed that. So,
well, I wanted
that was free money for you.
It was small increments, and so I didn't win it all in one sitting kind of thing. But it was great, and I just know that at Atlantic City, I'm going to be, when I'm not at the card show, I'm going to be at a blackjack table or a poker table. I mean, it's like the best of both worlds for me, because I love to do both. Are fun things to me.
The one year they had the industry summit here in Dallas, I ran a card show the weekend before the industry summit. It wasn't really with official Beckett permission. It was sort of Bill Sutherland was running the industry summit, and was sort of like a wink, wink, nod, nod. He was sending people there, but I couldn't officially be attached to it. And we had and the interesting thing was, because the industry summit attracted successful card store owners and people from around the country. I had dealers telling me that was the best Sunday they ever had at a card show, because these out-of-town dealers spent money like water. So they were all thrilled, and it was like the only person who didn't do well that Sunday was me, because of what was going on, I just brought my quarter box cards with me. Yeah. Because I knew I was going to the industry summit. And it was stuff I could keep in the car. Sweet card.
That's the card I got. The Wilson
That's a
Franks.
Sweet card.
The Campanella Wilson Franks. That was a blackjack card. And found money is so fun to spend, by the way. It's the best money to spend. It's so much fun just to get a card that I wouldn't have gotten without a nice run at the blackjack table. But hopefully that happens, again. It's certainly more accessible. There's casinos all over the place. And Sue says she never gets as much sleep as she does at the National. Man, I do not.
She doesn't have her kid with her.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I saw her at the National last year, and I bet you her kid wasn't with her. So, hey.
I've got all my friends.
Have to worry about getting up in the middle of the night.
How many Nationals have you been to, Sam?
One. Yeah. So I went to the one last year in Chicago, and it was really good. And then, I saw someone say you'll have to save up to pay for the hotel, because I was kind of a slacker, and I just booked an Airbnb. I think I'm going to drive up to the National. It's like 9-10 hours from North Carolina. I booked an Airbnb, and it wasn't really cheap. So
yeah, we have an Airbnb this year too, for the first time. I've always done the hotels before, but the hotels have always been like, Chicago is a great venue for it.
Yeah.
An Airbnb just made a lot more sense in AC, given it's just going to be a lot of us hanging out most of the time anyway. So it's going to be super fun.
Chicago's an ideal setup for the National, with where all the hotels are compared to the show. You can walk to a ton of hotels in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, Anaheim. There's probably a couple other cities that it's just, I'm going to use the word convenient between the hotels and the show venue. Mm-hmm. And there are other places, not so much.
Cleveland, not so much.
It's not that. They'll run shuttles. But you really need a car in Cleveland. Or, like I've always asked, when I go to Cleveland, I want to be across the street from a mall or a strip mall. So at least then I can go get something to eat in the morning or at night. If I
And-
don't go out and I'm not, I'm probably as old as the two of you are combined. I don't go out as much at night anymore.
Well, Sam, I think your experience will also be enhanced this year because you're even more deep into the card community, into the content creation. You know a lot more people, and that only enhances your experience. Let me tell you, it's
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, honestly, I feel like I spent a majority of my time last year. I mean, I was on the floor, but it was more so, yeah, just connecting and meeting with people. Where the day just went by so fast, to be honest. But I see here that this person says, I was actually planning on probably leaving Saturday, and it says that it's shore rental move out, move in day. It's important information, I think.
And John knows he does not live that far from Atlantic City, so he knows. I haven't stayed at a beach house in Atlantic City, or not Atlantic City, in New Jersey. Probably, I was talking about my sports information database days, probably since those days, about 1985. So it's been more than 35 years since I've stayed in a beach house. So it'll be an interesting experience after all these years.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, the place that I have is a couple miles out, hence also why I'm driving, and the fact that airplane tickets were insane. But yeah, I think it'll be nice just to have an Airbnb rather than be so clustered, I guess, with all the AC stuff.
Well, it's funny. I sometimes complain about Atlantic City, but I also, when I was growing up, it was my parents' favorite vacation spot. So I have a lot of very fond memories when I was young of Atlantic City. So, going on the boardwalk, the saltwater taffy, all that fun stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of really cool memories in Atlantic City. So there's a lot of positives about being where I grew up.
Yeah, but Rich, you'll spend most of your time talking to people and catching up with friends.
And especially in New Jersey, where I'm from. There are probably people I haven't seen in 15, 20 years. I haven't been back to New Jersey since my dad passed in 2006.
Sue's and everybody's talking about where they lived in Jersey back in the day. Fantastic.
I don't think I've ever.
Ventnor and Brigantine are both really, really nice areas.
What were we going to say, Sam?
I was going to say, I've actually never been to New Jersey. I've been to New York City. That's really it. But yeah, I haven't been to Jersey at all, or like Philly or any of that. So I think the closest would be like DC, and then New York City is like, I've been up and down. But
well, awesome. Well, guys, we are just about out of time. Any final thoughts, Rich or Sam?
I'm looking forward to the National. I'm in my 30s for that. I'm not exactly sure how many, but I'm somewhere in the 30s, probably 34, 35. So it's been a fun ride going to the National. It'll be nice going back home.
For sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for another great episode of Hobby Hotline. And we will catch you guys on Saturday. Make sure you show up Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Central. And we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.